was a time when the world believed hunger could be defeated by compassion, when nations spoke of mercy as though it were a policy, and cameras searched for proof that empathy could end a war. Somalia was meant to be the example, a place where soldiers would feed the starving and leave as saviors. But hunger is not only the absence of food, it is the absence of trust, of order, of hope that anyone still listens. By the time help arrived, the famine had already turned into a struggle for power. Mogadishu was a city breathing in fragments. Each street belonged to a different memory, a different wound. Aid convoys moved like trespassers through neighborhoods divided by fear. The sound of rotors echoed above streets where silence once meant safety. The mission began with noble words. It would end with the soldiers fighting for survival in a city that no longer believed in heroes. Between those two moments, promise and collapse, lay the truth of modern intervention, that no nation can feed another without first understanding its hunger. The Battle of Mogadishu was not only a failure of strategy, it was the collision of two realities that could not recognize each other. For America, it was a test of endurance. For Somalia, it was another chapter in a war that had never paused long enough to be named. And when it was over, nothing felt settled. Not victory, not defeat. Only the question of whether good intentions can survive the weight of consequence. October 1993. Mogadishu exists in a state beyond governance, beyond order. 2 years after the collapse of Siad Barre's regime, the city has become a theorem of human desperation, solved by warlords with grain and bullets. The United Nations arrives with food convoys, and the assumption that hunger creates gratitude. It does not.
Mohammed Farah Aidid controls the southern sectors through a network of clan loyalty older than any border the colonial powers ever drew. He understands what the arriving forces do not. That in Somalia, power flows through lineage and memory, not through the institutions that Western minds mistake for civilization itself. The Americans land with night vision goggles and the administrative confidence of empire. Task Force Ranger, 160 men, the distilled essence of military excellence. Delta Force operators who can shoot a quarter at 40 yards. Rangers trained to move through darkness like rumors. Helicopters that turn night into noon with their searchlights. They have come to arrest Aidid's deputies, to decapitate the command structure, to prove that precision can substitute for understanding.
The plan is elegant in its simplicity. 30 minutes, maybe 40. Fast rope from helicopters into the Bakara Market District, seize the targets from the Olympic Hotel, extract by ground convoy. They have done this 5 times already without significant resistance. Repetition breeds a specific kind of blindness. What they do not see, the city has been watching, learning the intervals, the patterns, the arrogance of daylight operations. Mogadishu is keeping a ledger, and the mathematics of retribution require only the right moment. The temperature that afternoon reaches 110 degrees. The city waits in the white heat, patient as stone. 3:42 in the afternoon. 16 helicopters cross into Bakara Market like thunder made visible. The fast ropes drop and men descend into an urban geometry they have studied from above, but never truly comprehended from within. Buildings press close, alleyways branch like capillaries, sight lines compressed to 30 feet, then 20, then 10. The assault force secures the Olympic Hotel in 11 minutes. 24 prisoners, flex-cuffed and hooded, loaded into vehicles. The operation is proceeding exactly as designed until the city itself begins to respond. Super 6-1, a Black Hawk piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Cliff Woolcott, takes a rocket-propelled grenade through the tail rotor at 3:56 p.m. The physics are simple and absolute. The helicopter spins, loses coherence, and falls into a neighborhood 6 blocks east of the target building. Woolcott and his crew chief die in the impact. The mathematical perfection of the mission evaporates in the dust cloud of the crash. The ground convoy, already departing, turns back. Every American warrior knows the code that precedes national identity or personal survival. No one gets left behind. It is doctrine, honor, and trap, simultaneously. Super 6-4, piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Michael Durant, takes a grenade 5 minutes later. It comes down harder, in a neighborhood even deeper into territory that has already begun to mobilize. Durant survives the crash with a broken back and femur. His entire crew does not. 2 helicopters down. The 30-minute operation is now an indefinite siege. The Somali response is not chaotic. Aidid's militia has prepared for precisely this rupture in American confidence. Roadblocks materialize from overturned cars and burning tires within minutes. Fighters emerge from mosques, from compounds, from the very texture of the neighborhood. They are not trained soldiers in the American sense, but they understand their terrain with the intimacy of men defending the rooms where their children sleep. The Americans are now fighting in every direction simultaneously, bound to 2 crash sites they cannot abandon, in a city they never learned to read. Night falls on Mogadishu, but the battle continues under illumination rounds that turn darkness into a flickering approximation of day. The Rangers and Delta operators at the first crash site form a perimeter measured in yards. Buildings surround them like a closing fist. The defenders fire 60,000 rounds that night, not from panic, but from the understanding that ammunition is their only renewable resource. Every window might conceal a shooter. Every doorway might birth an assault. The city itself has become hostile architecture. Staff Sergeant Matt Eversman, 26 years old, finds himself commanding men through circumstances no training scenario ever anticipated. His radio operator is killed by a round through the throat. His medic works on bodies faster than he can count them. The noble abstractions of leadership collapse into the immediate calculus of who might live if someone else dies first. The second crash site, where Durant lies injured, falls to Somali militia after a brief, savage fight. 2 Delta snipers, Master Sergeant Gary Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randy Shughart, insert themselves knowing the mathematics of their sacrifice. They defend Durant until their ammunition exhausts and the militia overruns their position. Both are killed. Durant is taken prisoner, his face appearing on CNN within hours, proof that American invincibility was always a temporary condition. The Pakistani and Malaysian UN forces attempt a rescue convoy, but turn back after encountering resistance they lack the mandate to overcome. The Americans are alone, which is different than being abandoned, but feels identical in the moment. Inside the perimeter, medics perform surgery with pocket knives and bootlaces. Men too wounded to fight hold ammunition for those who can. The night becomes a catalog of small heroisms that no camera captures, performed by young men who joined the military for college money or family tradition, and now find themselves determining the value of their own lives in real time. The shooting continues until dawn, not because either side can win, but because neither can stop. The rescue finally arrives at 5:30 a.m., a combined force of American, Pakistani, and Malaysian troops with armored vehicles that can withstand the gunfire still crackling through the streets. The extraction is chaos given the appearance of order. The wounded are loaded, some already dead but carried anyway. The living stumble toward the vehicles with faces emptied of everything except the animal imperative to move. When the convoy finally breaks free of Bakara Market, Mogadishu counts its dead. Estimates vary, as they always do when the casualties are not Western. Between 300 and 1,000 Somalis died in the battle. The number is uncertain because the city lacks the infrastructure to memorialize its losses with the precision that American culture demands. Bodies were buried quickly in the heat. Families mourned privately. The international press, positioned to document American suffering, gave Somali deaths the statistical abstraction reserved for those who die in the wrong uniform or no uniform at all.
18 Americans are dead, 73 wounded, 1 captured. These numbers are exact, because exactness is how a superpower processes grief.
The battle is immediately declared both a tactical victory and a strategic catastrophe, which is the only honest way to describe an operation that achieved its objective while destroying its purpose. Within days, images circulate globally. The most famous, a dead American soldier dragged through the streets by jubilant Somalis. The image is grotesque, dehumanizing, designed to humiliate. It succeeds. What the image does not show: the context of asymmetric warfare, the civilian deaths, the helicopter gunships that had turned neighborhoods into kill zones for months. Memory is always curated. Grievance is always selective. President Clinton announces a withdrawal timeline. 6 months. The mission redefined from intervention to exit. The warlords have not been defeated. They have simply outlasted the attention span of a democracy that measures commitment in news cycles. Aidid remains free, his power arguably enhanced by his survival. He dies 3 years later in factional fighting, killed not by American precision but by the internal logic of the chaos he helped create. The Battle of Mogadishu does not end on October 4th. It migrates into the American subconscious, where it breeds a particular species of caution. When genocide unfolds in Rwanda 7 months later, the Clinton administration declines intervention. 800,000 Tutsis are murdered in 100 days, while American policy debates the definition of genocide to avoid triggering obligations under international law. The ghosts of Mogadishu whisper in every meeting: no American casualties, no mission creep, no entanglement in conflicts we cannot solve with clean hands and clear exits. The phrase "Black Hawk Down" enters the lexicon as shorthand for quagmire, for the moment when good intentions collide with intractable realities. It becomes a rhetorical barrier invoked by both hawks and doves, depending on which intervention they wish to prevent or justify. The military learns different lessons. Special Operations Forces study the battle as a case study in adaptability under catastrophic conditions. The tactics are refined: better communication, integrated air support, armored extraction vehicles. The 75th Ranger Regiment adds the battle to its oral tradition, a story told to new recruits about what happens when everything fails except the man beside you. But the deeper lesson, the one that America refuses to fully metabolize, that technological superiority cannot substitute for cultural comprehension. That night vision and air support and elite training cannot overcome the advantage of defending your own streets against strangers who speak none of your languages, honor none of your codes, and will leave in 6 months regardless of whether they win or lose. Somalia taught America that it could be hurt. Iraq and Afghanistan would teach America that being hurt repeatedly does not necessarily lead to wisdom. Mogadishu today remains a city the West prefers to forget. The Battle of Mogadishu is American memory. The city itself continues as Somali present tense. Al-Shabaab, the Islamist insurgency that would not exist without the power vacuum left by collapsed intervention, controls rural areas and conducts bombings in the capital with grim regularity. The African Union maintains a peacekeeping force that holds the airport and government district, but ventures into certain neighborhoods only with overwhelming force. Somalia remains a failed state, which is a Western term for a place that refuses to organize itself according to expectations designed in distant capitals. The Bakara market still operates, a sprawl of commerce and survival where people buy bread and bullets with equal necessity. The buildings that American soldiers fought through have been repaired, or not, depending on resources and priorities invisible to anyone who sees the city as a battlefield rather than a home. Some of the Somali militiamen who fought in 1993 are grandfathers now, telling stories to children who navigate a city still shaped by warlords and foreign interventions that arrive with promises and depart with relief. The American soldiers who survived are in their 50s, some still processing what happened in those 18 hours, some refusing to process it at all. Michael Durant, the captured pilot, was released after 11 days and eventually wrote a book about the experience. He later started a defense contracting company. The arc from prisoner to entrepreneur maps a certain kind of American resilience that transforms trauma into capital. Aidid's son, Hussein Farah Aidid, served in the United States Marine Corps during the very operation that targeted his father. He later returned to Somalia and briefly claimed his father's position before the clan dynamics that give and revoke power moved on without him. Irony is history's most consistent product. There is a museum at Fort Benning, Georgia, where artifacts from the battle are displayed under glass. Bullet-torn uniforms, the helicopter tail number from Super 6-1, photographs of young men who died before their faces aged enough to match their fathers. Veterans visit with their children and try to explain what cannot be explained. Why courage and futility can occupy the same actions. Why winning a battle can feel identical to losing a war. The Somalis have no equivalent museum. Their memory is oral, familial, woven into the warnings mothers give to sons about trusting foreigners who arrive in uniforms they cannot pronounce. The dead are remembered in the texture of daily life, not in institutions designed to process collective grief into national narrative. Mark Bowden's book, Black Hawk Down, becomes a bestseller. Ridley Scott's film adaptation follows, turning the battle into cinema that valorizes American heroism while rendering Somali fighters as faceless antagonists. The film is technically brilliant and morally incomplete, which makes it a perfect mirror of the intervention itself. What the film cannot capture: the complexity of fighting for survival in a country the world decided was too broken to merit serious attention until oil or terrorism made it strategically relevant. What the book struggles to convey: that for every American soldier fighting to save his brother, there was a Somali fighter defending his neighborhood against men who arrived uninvited and left undefeated. Both sides claimed victory. Both sides were correct. Both sides were wrong. History is not what happened. History is what we agree to carry forward. The Battle of Mogadishu endures in American consciousness as a story about brotherhood, sacrifice, and the limits of good intentions. It is remembered as a tragedy, which is correct, and as an aberration, which is not. In Somalia, October 3rd and 4th, 1993, are remembered as the days when Mogadishu refused to surrender, when a city armed with rage and RPGs demonstrated that empires can be made to bleed. It is remembered as a victory, which is partially correct, and as the end of foreign interference, which is tragically wrong. The truth exists somewhere in the 18 hours between certainty and evacuation, in the space where courage and futility become indistinguishable, where the dead on both sides stop being symbols and return to being sons. 30 years later, American Special Operations Forces still train for the scenario where everything fails simultaneously. Somali children still grow up in a city where peace is a rumor and gunfire is the grammar of daily life. The helicopters have long since been replaced. The bodies have long since been buried. The battle continues in the choices both nations make about intervention, memory, and the stories they tell themselves about why young men die in streets they cannot name, for reasons that dissolve the moment the shooting stops. Mogadishu endures. So does the question of what, exactly, was accomplished by all that precision, all that blood, all that certainty that collapsed in a single afternoon when the sky fell and the city fought back. The answer, like the city itself, refuses to be simplified.